And welcome to the Mount Vernon School of Art Summer Lecture Series, hosted here in the Pennsylvania Chautauqua's Hall of Philosophy. This place has a lot of history and ambiance and a great smell. I know we love using it for our lectures. But a little bit about the school real quick, just in case anyone's out there is unfamiliar. Mount Vernon School of Art is a 7-week pressure cooker. Going outside and connecting with nature and learning about the nature of seeing. They have a rotation of about 15 instructors and critics that come through. It's really thought of as a cohesive experience rather than the kind of fragmentation that many of our students might be used to back home at their home schools. So it offers this kind of learning boost that comes through immersion and extended time concentrating on something singular. I want to thank Simpson Strout for his support of the summer lecture series, and also Purpose One, our premier corporate sponsor, for everything they've done for us this year, including helping pay for huge giant trees over at one of our cottages. I want to introduce Jordan Wolfson, who's our lead painting instructor this summer. I brought him in to start off the program, and it was a really great decision. He's had about a week and a half with the students before he passes the baton to someone else. And this is our chance to hear him now talk about his own work. Currently living in Boulder, Colorado. He got an MFA at Yale in 1991 and attended UC Santa Cruz before that. He got a Fine Art Work Center residency, Pollock Krasner grant. He's had some shows recently at Gallery 1261 in Denver and at Buddhist University Naropa in Boulder. He teaches workshops online and in Boulder. And that's kind of what that interested me, because not only is his painting in the zone of what we're trying to teach students here, he has that kind of direct teaching experience that can span people that are just getting their feet wet all the way up to the advanced, the high calculus visual thinkers. He's published a book called Painting and Consciousness and currently working on Painting for Our Time, tentatively titled, but I would like everyone to welcome Jordan.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you to the Mount Vernon School of Art and the Hall of Philosophy for having me here. The talk that I'll be giving now, it's not actually on my own work. When I was young, I had the good fortune to go to a public high school that had oil paints stocked in the art room. Lois Rosenfeld, our teacher, taught us all how to sketch canvas, prime with rabbit skin glue, real gesso, and how to begin to use oil paints. It was a revelation. My first painting was of Mark Twain. I copied a photograph of him that I found in National Geographic. It was a time, maybe still, when every art classroom in the United States had a stack of National Geographics for students to browse through. For some reason, this one had an article on Mark Twain. I'm still looking for that first painting. This is just a placeholder. The photo that I used looked sort of like this one. My painting didn't look much like Mark Twain, but it did look a good bit like my father. Wherever you are, Lois, and we called our teachers by their first names. Wherever you are, I hope you're happy. It was a huge gift. There was something truly magical about working with paint. Powerful and magical. Like encountering an enchanted substance. It was also Lois's last year there. After that, she got in her sleek, dark purple sports car and drove away. Katie, who was in the fiber arts, was the teacher who came to replace Lois and didn't know a lick about oil paint. So I proceeded to try to teach myself. It was slow going, but I loved it. In college, I was a bio major, pre-med. But I took studio art classes every quarter to feed my soul. And eventually my soul said pretty clearly that I should follow my heart. And my heart was in love with painting. I didn't think about being an artist. I just wanted to paint. And that was more or less the beginning of my painting journey. I really had no plan and no idea of what it would entail. Looking back, I think it would have been helpful if someone had been able to explain a bit more about what to expect. I don't mean about making it as an artist commercially. That would have been helpful, although I really do believe we have put too much emphasis on that commercial success as a sign of a successful, meaningful life in paint. More about that later. But what I do mean is what to expect from the painting journey itself. So that's what I'd like to talk about here. I'm going to start with the broad main stages of the painting journey as I understand them. The gathering stage, the integration stage, and the stage of pursuit. I'll describe each one in a general way. We'll then focus on the transition from the stage of integration to the stage of pursuit. What happens? What does that call for? Then we'll take a bit of time with some important aspects of this last stage, pursuit. Generally speaking, when we think of great painters, we tend to think of this last stage of pursuit, which is their mature exploration. Even if their work goes through lots of changes and permutations. But for developing painters, it's hugely helpful and perhaps critical to be familiar with and get a handle on the first two parts, gathering and integration. Each stage has its own particular goals and challenges, and it's important not to confuse them. The gathering stage consists of skill development, learning how to draw, how to paint, how to look at stuff and create a convincing rendition on a flat surface, proportions, geometry, learning how to mix color and find tonal relationships, how to handle paint, how composition works, a basic familiarity with materials and how to use them. During this stage, we're integrating our system, our eyes, hands, brain, materials, thinking, and feeling. We're learning to see. Perhaps as well will be an engagement with non-representational painting and exploring the more intuitive and open-ended ways of working, becoming familiar with what that feels like, handling large amounts of material, or any accident, playing, and risk-taking. Along with this should come a basic familiarity of the world of painting, art history, great painters, past and present, and where your own affinities lie. Which painters really turn you on, make you want to paint, inspire, sort of turn out to be your painting family? You begin to learn about your own personal painting lineage and who alive today is participating in that way. During the gathering stage, it's important to work with lots of different teachers and be influenced by them. The more the better. Exposure is key. And if you have two or more teachers that you feel particularly close to their teaching and who also contradict each other, that's gold. Because it forces you to figure out and wrestle with those conflicting attitudes. What sort of combination is most fitting for you? I'd like to mention that even though this is a period of skill development, it doesn't mean that strong and beautiful work doesn't get made. I can think of so many students through the years that have done exceptionally beautiful work. One of the dangers this time of gathering is mistaking the goal of one stage for the goal of another. Since we're involved in this stage with skill development, we may take the mastery of realistic depiction as the ultimate goal of painting, as opposed to an extremely helpful set of skills to help us further our own path. And this may inhibit the kind of deep exploration and experimentation that may be necessary for us in order to find our most satisfying way of working. Which is not to say that realism for some may be their actual path in making powerful work. But for others, it may be only a very helpful skill set. Which brings us to the next stage, integration. During the integration stage of the painting journey, The developing painter begins to put together their own way of working, their own sense of direction, abstract or representational, observation or memory, thick or thin, spontaneous discovery or planned composition or some combination, our own ways of marking. You make space for an in-depth exploration of your way. You explore what you care about, where you live internally as you paint. What's your energy like? Do you work more analytically or intuitively, more closed form or more open form, a flat space or a full space? Are your drawings more emotional or philosophical, perceptual or political or spiritual, or a combination of any or all of these? And all of this takes time. Drawing, lots and lots of drawing, is a great way to explore this territory. It's fast, it's not precious, it's cheap, and you can cover a lot of ground fairly quickly. You're experimenting and exploring. Generally speaking, this is what a lot of grad programs are about, providing the space and time for painters to be able to do just this, experiment and explore. So often, when grad students are too focused on producing finished expert work, the teachers try to break all that down to help the student discover deeper, perhaps less superficial ways of painting. For me, my gathering stage, and I'm not counting from high school, but from the time I took my first college course until the time I was really on my own, trying to put pieces together, that was about 14 years. The integration stage for me was about 6 years. Part of that time was just due to learning about myself and who I was as an adult and what I cared about. And as Heraclitus said, life is short and art is long. Eventually, through this hands-on path of painting, you start to find your own way. And it takes courage, because your way is really just yours. You truly are the only authority in the end that matters. And you begin to become familiar with your own personal set of questions as a painter. What am I trying to achieve when I paint? What am I looking for? What do I actually care about? These questions become the drivers in our work, which leads us to our pursuit, which is another way of naming our mature exploration. A successful painting path is not one that provides answers. It's one that endlessly pursues meaningful questions your whole life long. This framing of questions is a good way to describe transition from the stage of integration to the stage of pursuit. In a sense, the clarification of our own essential questions is a way of describing the experience of, oh, this is what I care about. It's where our life force dwells naturally, unbidden and unforced. It's what moves us, drives us, compels us. Lucian Freud, as a young man in his 30s, wrote about the need to cultivate one's obsession. And as that continues, your obsession becomes your discipline. The painter makes real to others his innermost feelings about all that he cares for. A secret becomes known to everyone who views the picture through the intensity with which it is felt. The painter must give a completely free rein to any feelings or sensations he may have and reject nothing to which he is naturally drawn. It is just this self-indulgence which acts for him as the discipline through which he discards what is inessential to him and so crystallizes his tastes. A painter's taste must grow out of what so obsesses him in life that he never has to ask himself what it is suitable for him to do in art. I often think the great painters throughout time are the ones who ask questions that have no final answer, that simply drive us forward. Cézanne, striving to create an image that would integrate the relentless flux of experience together with the unchanging and eternal present moment. Giacometti ceaselessly trying to put into paint the invisible quality of a person's presence. Rembrandt yearning to make paintings that express the endless depths of human pathos and love. The answers, the forms, the paintings that come from these endeavors for these painters are tentative solutions that give way to another round of questions. A dear painter friend of mine, Mayor Appelfeld, once said to me in a conversation that painters are trying to paint the invisible. Well, how? Often when we're developing as painters, we believe that we need to arrive at the right answers. The great paintings that we discover in museums and galleries, we experience as extraordinary answers. But for the painter who made them, they were open questions. And for developing painters in the stage of gathering, we do want to arrive at clear answers. It is this tonal relationship, this shape, very specifically. But as we continue on our way, the cultivation of uncertainty, a kind of openness, a question calls for. This becomes an important key to our making. I don't mean equivocation, I mean an openness to not know and to be open and receive. I also want to be clear that the terms of I'm using of questions and answers are conceptual terms of the mind and are useful for the mind. But for the way the mind can participate and help further our work. But in truth, when we work, when we're in a deep engagement, we may not be thinking in those terms, and we may not be thinking much at all. But to not be thinking does not mean to not be aware. One thing that occurs when we pursue these core questions that propel and compel us is that we find ourselves in deep engagement. We may find ourselves gripped in a sense, and this deep engagement draws our life force into the activity, the marking, making, and wielding of paint. This deep engagement of our life force in the activity of painting is what ends up imbuing the painting presence. This is key. Presence is key. It is what in the end makes a painting powerful and alive. Presence imbues painting with power. This energetic exchange that imbues a painting with power occurs when we show up fully as we work, as we mark and wield material. There are many, many ways that this happens, as many ways as there are people. Presence is key. It's the real power of an image, an aesthetic object. And curiously, presence is invisible. It's a felt energy, a something that we sense but can't exactly name. When I first began teaching full-time, I was living in Israel. One of the places I taught was an art school in Tel Aviv called College. And most of my students were in their early 20s or so. I kept telling them that to understand painting, you must see paintings live. Reproductions won't do it. Go to Europe, I said. And they looked at me like I was crazy. No one had any money. Then one day, a special exhibition came to Jerusalem from Vienna in honor of the ex-mayor's 80th birthday. He was from Vienna originally. So I took a group of students on a field trip to look at old master paintings on display. There were some beautiful works there, Titian, El Greco, Van Dyck, but at the end was a Velázquez masterpiece that knocked everyone out, and we all grew quiet, standing in front of it. That painting had power. And I spoke to them there about presence. That painting had tremendous presence. When I was an undergrad, one of my teachers introduced me to the work of Milton Resnick. I only found out quite recently that they were actually friends, which is sort of incredible now that I think about it. But in any case, I was deeply interested in the work. I could see, even in reproduction, that there was something there for me. But it wasn't until many years later that I was able to experience the work live. It was mind-blowing. There was nothing there, but there was everything there. No subject matter, no narrative, no drama really, just paint. But the paint carries extraordinary, profound, energetic resonance, like a pilgrimage site, like a temple. Another painter whose work does this is Agnes Martin, in quite an opposite direction physically. There's almost nothing on the canvas. And for me personally, the reproductions really do nothing, mean almost nothing. But the actual objects themselves are like magic, powerful. You can go to the Resnick Haslock Foundation in New York City, see the work. You can see Martin's work in Taos, New Mexico, Dia Foundation. It's worth the trips, but truly you need to find your own sources and meet them face to face. This brings us to the deeper nature of the last stage of the painting journey, pursuit. The stage of the painting journey, as I mentioned earlier, is usually thought of as the mature work of a painter, something full and felt starts to occur more consistently. When we honor our actual questions and not find ourselves making the paintings that we think we're supposed to make, but follow our actual desires and where we truly live when we paint, when we honor and accept that our subject matter, our way of working the material, our imagery, we end up discovering freedom. We end up experiencing, well, this is how it is. For better or worse, this is how I work. This is what I make. These are my limitations. And these limitations become my strengths. Because once I accept that this is how it is, I have the freedom to really bring myself fully into my work as I am. And that freedom is full of life force, is life force. So that's the first thing. And this is, in this more mature stage that I'm calling pursuit, I have the freedom to bring myself fully into my work as I am. There's an expansive engagement. Life gets bigger. After the painting session, I may have a lingering misgiving and doubts. Matisse was famously anxious, but something else, something very real and valuable, occurred while he was painting. One might describe this aspect of freedom as a kind of self-expression. But in order to move the painting further to wholeness, something additional is necessary beyond personal self-expression. What begins as a kind of personal drive to make the mark now shifts into a position of receptivity. What does the painting call for? What does it need? How can I best serve it? And in order to discover what that might be, I need to become patient and listen to the painting and often wait, kind of active waiting. I cannot get ahead of myself or the painting. I must stay right here in the moment, actively waiting. This is present moment awareness. From this place of present moment awareness, thoughts may arise to make a mark here or there. Change this shape, that color, shift the painting in its own terms towards its own essential form. My marking is endeavoring to bring the painting into its own truth. And in order to do that, I am shifting from a kind of personal expression to a kind of impersonal serving and nurturing. I move from the protagonist actor to the midwife nurturer. But it's all truth telling. And sometimes what's called for isn't pretty or nice. Sometimes what's called for might even be ruthless. But it's all in service of the core truth of the painting. This present moment awareness, as I bring the painting further into its own wholeness, again brings presence into the making. The experience of wholeness is the experience of presence. This path of deep aesthetic decision making brings us into the internal experience of wholeness. It isn't an external 2D design problem. It's much more felt. From this felt place within us, we learn how to navigate and bring the painting into its own formal wholeness. These two things, my inner experience and the outer expression in paint, actually occur together and are inseparable. Again, I think of Milton Resnick in his way of describing his own painting experience. Painting has to become what you really are doing and not what you are reacting to outside of it. And to do that, a great deal of changes have to happen to you. The only way I can tell you what the most important change is that the unity, the thing that you say makes the painting work, and you still say things like that, but it has to happen to you. You have to become complete in some way. The universe, a complete thing in yourself, in order to reach across and breathe some unity upon this thing that you're faced with. So let's take a few moments now and look at some examples of mature painters pursuing their questions, getting a glimpse of what that looks like. Oh, I know this is here and I keep doing this presentation and every time it always surprises me. This is a detail of the Cave of Hands in Argentina. I think it's like, I don't know, 17,000 years old, something like that. We've been making handmade two-dimensional images for a really long time. And that's who we are. Like we're this subset of humanity. Cezanne, watercolor, Mount Saint Victoire. Nature is always the same, but nothing in her that appears to us lasts. Our art must render the thrill of her permanence along with her elements, the appearance of all her changes. It must give us the taste of her eternity. Kurt Morrisell. Perhaps the fleeting moment, anything, however small, a smile, a flower, a fruit, is an ambition still unfulfilled. Mondrian. Vertical and horizontal lines are the expression of two opposing forces. They exist everywhere and dominate everything. Their reciprocal action constitutes life. I recognize that the equilibrium of any particular aspect of nature rests on the equivalence of its opposites. I'm not interested in abstracting or taking things out or reducing painting to design, form, line, and color. I paint this way because I can keep putting more things in it. Drama, anger, pain, love, a figure, a horse, my ideas about space. Through your eyes, it again becomes an emotion or idea. Maria. I believe that nothing can be more abstract, more unreal than what we actually see. We know that all we can see of the objective world as human beings never really exists as we see and understand it. Matter exists, of course, but has no intrinsic meaning of its own, such as the meanings that we attach to it. We can only know that a cup is a cup, that a tree is a tree. Don't say. The strokes in my paintings speak of my life and experiences. They are sometimes soft, They sometimes laugh and are often violent. They bleed and cry and struggle to tell my story with marks and colors and lines and shapes. Angelina Pearly. There are seeds there in that painting as well, little ones, not big ones, all little ones. This painting is about my father's country and about the bush plum. The flowers are there, the little bush plum flowers. That bush plum is my father's dreaming. That bush plum comes from the Ahopera country. It has little white flowers. Then after that, there is the fruit. If it doesn't rain, the plants are dry. If it rains, there is an abundance of bush plums. The flower is small when they have just come out. Well, after that, fruit comes. The fruits are really nice when they are ripe. The paintings are giant with all this little, it looks like, look at a night sky. Auerbach. The unity in any painter's work arises from the fact that a person brought to a desperate situation will behave in a certain way. Real style is not having a program. It's how one behaves in a crisis. Gillian Patterson Cracken. It's strange, but as I look back on my life, the project of fulfilling myself, becoming someone, appeared to be a process of collecting, adding friends, possessions, information, academic degrees, skills, identities. And this attitude has some validity in the practical world, but in fact, it has only made the sense of my identity more complex. The truth is that in the studio, where I am most myself, the opposite seems to be the case. Bit by bit, everything is taken away. I forget that I'm a Democrat, a student, a woman, a sister, even that I am a painter. And more of me disappears. Art makes life bearable. It isn't a luxury. We live in difficult times. What is the meaning and importance of this thing that we do? What does painting really matter? When we come upon a great painting in a museum or gallery, there's a sense of wonder, beauty, and peace. In this moment, life is good. When we as makers arrive at a sense of resolution of painting, there's a sense of wholeness, rest. In this place, there is no fragmentation, just the wholeness of being.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so much for being here. And somehow I think of that Auerbach quote when I ask this question. What you talk about is extremely powerful and it's vulnerable. How do you protect that? And what is the most important thing about that you have to protect?
It doesn't need protection. It's the most powerful thing there is. We need to protect our access to it. It's easy to get lost. It's easy to be distracted. The world that we live in is set up in ways that are completely contrary to our nature, to us makers. And so we have to struggle and we need to contend, we need to make money, we need to pay rent, we need to figure all those pieces out. So we need to somehow figure out how to do all that stuff, live in the world and still maintain access to the truth that we need. So, right, so that's hard. And so this community is huge, giant. If you're isolated, you're gonna forget. You need to stay in contact. You need to work, because doing it, moving it, keeps the energy moving. Go to see great work. That's a reminder, like Auerbach would talk about going to the National Gallery, you know, all the time, looking at reproductions as his painting as a way of reminding himself the truth. So all those pieces are really important. I mean, the truth itself, this is nothing more powerful, but our access to it can get buried for sure.
You spoke about three sort of phases of painting, and they all made perfect sense, but I'm wondering if they're always quite that linear progression. Has there been in your practice a need to re-enter a gathering stage
Yes.
or move more fluidly between these categories?
Yes, absolutely. What I outlined was a very schematic, description in order just to, make some sense and organize the thinking. But life isn't like that, for sure. And so there are times when, I'm at some point, it's like, oh, I need certain skills I don't have. And then I go back and figure out, well, what are the skills that I'm missing? Or I'm trying to figure something out, or right, for sure. Or, I'm discovering some things like, oh, this is what I really care about, and realize, oh, that's what I was doing back in my 20s. It's not really that linear at all, but it helps to sort of see it. And then when we think about our lives, we do think of it chronologically, but things are all mixed for sure.
I love the range of work that you showed, and I think it's so important to realize that, a lot of people categorize painting realistic, figurative, abstract, spiritual, geometric. And with your talk, so beautiful how that all just sort of through it all that we're looking at. But I wanted to ask you about forgetting. How do you feel about the idea of forgetting? You have to know yourself, perhaps you have to forget a lot of things.
Well, that's sort of interesting how Gillian Peterson Cragg at the end kind of speaks about she's just sort of disappearing, and there is a kind of, I mean, when I describe, and I'm making a painting and there's all this force from me and self-expression, but at a certain point I'm serving the painting and it becomes impersonal. And in a way, it's less me and it's more, how do I serve the painting? The personal me lessens over time. Is that what you mean by forgetting?
I don't know, maybe we have all these goals as a painter and then we let some of them go. Are we letting things go as we're discovering what's essential or?
I assume I'm interested in looking at stuff and marking in relation to what I'm seeing. And then, sometimes I want to relate in a more straightforward representational tonal way. Sometimes I'm just marking in relation to seeing. But that's sort of what I meant when I was saying in reference to John's question, because I don't really feel like I've got goals as a painter. I just want to paint. And this world is set up, you need goals, and you need, and bottom lines and resumes. What I really love about having a show is that people see it. There's a circuit. There's an energetic circuit through sharing the work. That's really important. Money's important, sure, absolutely. But really, it's this energetic cycle. I want to participate in. That's it.
Thank you for your talk. And I just wanted to comment that I think it's really cool that it was such a generous lecture about other people's work. I'm curious, in your information gathering portion of this, what specifically led you to this point? I think perceptual, observational paintings, I know you're doing landscapes and still lifes, like what in the information gathering led you to where you are now?
I mean, my journey has as a painter, has been consistently informed by what we tend to call spirituality. And so over time, I came to understand they're the same thing for me. And that my painting practice is also what we would call spiritual practice, although I tend to think that the term spiritual is an odd one because it seems to split the world into the material and the spiritual, and that's not the case at all. It's all one thing. It's just that there's an aspect of the material world that goes beyond what our culture tends to find real. There you go. But we know that as painters. We're wielding material, but there's this thing beyond the material, that's what we're in love with. When we keep painting, and the years tick by, we have to understand, well, why am I still doing this? And I've had to sacrifice a whole lot to keep doing this. Unless you're really one of the very lucky, a lot of things get harder. And we keep doing this. And so it becomes really kind of paramount to ask, what's the meaning? Why am I doing this? And so I've dug in to figure out, well, what's meaningful? What's really going on here? Because if I can't locate that while I work, I'll stop. It's too hard.
You mentioned about sharing. Why haven't you shared any of your artwork?
Well, that's a good question. I was mulling over what to talk about here, there's a time limitation, and so I just didn't have time to do it all, but stick around.
Get your website out there.
There you go, we got a website.
JordanWolfson.com.
.com, not .org, there are two of us in the art world.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the way you've broken down these steps into like in a very objective way. And I was just wondering, kind of like in the phase where I am kind of post grad school and thinking more about like within that last stage, like how you conceive of like mini stages within that in relation to creating bodies of work.
Right.
Or things like maybe outside of the work, like research or even like assessing or like conceiving of bodies of work just in your own work.
Yeah, well, certainly, right, so in that pursuit, and I'm like, oh, these are the things I really care about. So I find it really helpful for myself to have like projects where it gives me sort of a structure to work within. And like, okay, I'm gonna explore this aspect in this way for this period. So it's harder for me to like, well, now what do I wanna do? So I give myself big projects, but they're all, I recognize them within, these larger interests, although these are interests that they're core drivers of meaning in me.
I'd like to focus on your presentation, not your work. You have in mind, I'm not a painter, you bring in your presentation an essay that conveys your personal experience as a painter. It conveys an outline for young artists to consider, not to necessarily take.
Yeah.
Consider. It's an exposition in trying to explain the experience of the artist. It's a form of literature. Are there examples of other essays by other artists that attempt to speak to the things I just described that have influenced you or that you found helpful?
Yes. There's an extraordinary essay called Painting and the Struggle for the Whole Self by Andrew Forage. You can find it in a book of selected essays, observation, notation. Stunning essay on what it means to paint from the inside. He doesn't go through chronologically, he just kind of arrives at his experience of what painting is and talks about it from that place. There are essays by John Berger that I find really speak to these kinds of experiences. There's one in particular called A Professional Secret in a book of collected essays called Keeping a Rendezvous. There's another essay by him Small Steps to a Short Theory of the Visible in a selected essay, collection of essays in the Shape of a Pocket by John Burchett. I don't know, Bill. Yeah, thank you.
It's not a question, but we do have a comment in the chat. Angela wanted to thank you for the wonderful talk and said that it felt good to be reminded of what things ground us as artists.
That might be our moment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.